Economists expect a global recession soon, as rising inflation and debt levels threaten stability across every major continent and market. For months, Middle East tensions have been rising, and we hope they stayed local. We feared these cracks in the global order would eventually hit our bank accounts through rising inflation and costs. Stability is gone. The International Monetary Fund's latest report provides a grim update, forcing us to rethink our economic projections for the next few years as global uncertainty rises. What used to be a manageable risk is now a documented threat to global prosperity. Recent data shows the situation is much worse than market analysts predicted last Tuesday. The IMF just cut its 2006 global growth forecast, lowering the expected rate to 3.1% as economic uncertainty continues to weigh on the worldwide outlook. This isn't a seasonal fluctuation, it is a fundamental downward revision caused by the recent increase in violence. Middle East tensions are driving this economic slowdown as the recent escalation has pushed the conflict into a far more dangerous phase. IMF chief economist Gita Gopinath warns that if the Iran conflict escalates, the global economy faces a real risk of entering a recession, potentially triggering widespread financial instability. The IMF's recent report says the war in Iran and the resulting oil price shock have suddenly ruined the outlook for global growth. A massive energy crisis might trigger the world's largest oil shock, likely surpassing the 1970s crisis that crippled global markets and drove prices up. This isn't just a Middle East issue, it's a systemic shock hitting every major global economy directly, creating widespread instability across interconnected international markets. Developing economies face the worst hits. According to IMF projections, growth in these specific regions will drop to 3.9% during 2026. This war cuts growth in these developing nations by 0.3 percentage points below the forecasts made before the fighting escalated. This damage happens because these nations sit closer to the conflict, face broken bank transfers, and rely on unstable energy supplies. Even isolated nations feel the pressure. The UK's growth might beat forecasts by 0.8 percentage points this year, but the global economic trajectory is still moving downward. This growing instability splits the global economy, leaving certain vulnerable regions struggling to survive while other areas face complete, total stagnation. India faces massive risks. A sudden oil price spike would likely derail the country's current economic growth and destabilize the entire national budget. Gita Gopinath says India needs faster energy independence because the government can no longer afford to keep fuel prices artificially low. IMF data shows energy costs are no longer predictable, shifting instead toward extreme price swings and fragile global supply chains. Nations now have to prepare for a reality where energy becomes a weapon of war. The IMF's recent drop to 3.1% shows that the safety margins we relied on during the early 2020s are gone. We can no longer assume energy supplies will remain stable. These figures aren't just statistics. They signal a global slowdown that might trigger industrial decline and lower consumer spending across most major markets. As Middle East fighting spreads across the region, the resulting economic damage is growing at the same rapid pace, destabilizing global markets. Last year's 3.2% growth looked fine on paper. However, Gita Gopinath warned that these numbers are actually quite deceptive, masking underlying economic instabilities. Current growth figures hide the actual damage, but structural shifts are happening now. The global economy is fundamentally different than before. A war recession is mathematically likely if the Middle East conflict continues on its current trajectory without any intervention or change. Energy security and geopolitical stability have merged into a single, inseparable crisis that defines our current global political landscape. Investors, business owners, and consumers need to prepare for a reality where energy prices and global instability stay permanently high. We cannot assume the old, cheaper era is coming back. The IMF's latest report outlines the coming crisis. We have to decide how to react to these changes. Global markets are shifting every single day. If you want to prepare for the next geopolitical shift, you need to track these specific economic indicators closely. Subscribe and turn on notifications to catch my next analysis. I want to hear your thoughts on the IMF's warning. Tell me in the comments.